Thank you. This morning I've introduced a private members bill which bans or makes it an offence to download AI tools that are specifically designed for the purpose of generating child sexual abuse materials. Now these tools are currently available and are currently being downloaded, and they allow perpetrators to train the AI tools to create this material and then delete the images so that they can't be detected. It normalises and desensitises this sort of illegal material. It also makes it really hard for law enforcement to actually locate children who are at risk, because it's hard to tell the difference between synthetic and real material. This is a hole in our current legislation, and regulating AI is difficult, and we do need a holistic approach, but we also need to plug the gaps in our legislation as they occur. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with urgently. It has a relatively simple solution, and there should be an offence for downloading these particular tools. There is no good reason for these tools to exist or for them to be downloaded by anyone in Australia. So I really urge the government to respond quickly and get onto this issue so that we can keep our children safe. And I now want to hand over to Danielle Kelly from the International Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, who brought this issue to my attention.
Thank you so much, Kate, and the other members. We are really pleased to be here following the ICMEC Australia Roundtable last week. This has been an amazing intake from the government and from the members who are here today, looking into this issue, which is so vital for our children. So I work from an advocacy and not-for-profit perspective, and what we're looking for is a small change to government process that will allow police officers to actually put people away for this type of problem that all of us should be worried about. So thank you so much, we really appreciate it.
I seconded this very important bill. Now, sometimes in this place it's frustrating because big reform can take time. But when a very specific gap in legislation, and a gap that we know is causing harm and putting our most vulnerable at risk, our children, is identified, it's beholden on the government to act quickly without delay. Now, protecting children from sexual exploitation is something that I would assume is a multi-partisan commitment of everyone in this place. What we have now is these tools, AI generation tools, that can be downloaded through the App Store, and then put material that is offensive and grossly dangerous is able to be created. Now, this is a very simple gap that can be resolved very quickly by the government by adopting this legislation, this amendment, to ensure we close the loophole. The only thing I could stress to everyone, with every week of delay that we do not close this loophole, more children are at risk of very serious harm. And so that makes it very beholden on the government to act very promptly. We know we have a delay for the next sitting fortnight, and so for every week is additional Australian children being put at risk. So I urge the government to adopt this bill without delay.
The government has a duty of care to protect our children. We know that this technology moves really quickly. We need the government to show the same level of agility and responsiveness that perpetrators of these horrible crimes are showing. They've got an in today. My colleagues have given them a means of dealing with this issue immediately, and we ask the government to act with real intent, with purpose and with effect.
Sorry, I'm not sure the best person to answer this, but how do we determine which tools are specifically for child sexual abuse material and which one is just AI that's then being nefariously used? So it'd be harder, I assume, to ban a broader tool. So how do you make that determination?
Do you want to take that? Yeah. So there's a couple of little parts in that. So notify apps, generally you need consent between adults to determine it. So from that perspective, we would like to ban all notify apps. Why do we need that in an Australian community? You're right, there are other AI tools that you can actually have that are online that are in the middle, but notify apps particularly. So those who take an image of a person or a child and turn it into a nude image and then be used for child sexual exploitation is what we're particularly looking at today.
So in terms of, I've had a look at some of these new fire apps and they're really easy to kind of download and put on, but at least in Apple's case they say that shouldn't be the case on their app store, but obviously something's falling through. Now when you write to a lot of these companies, they're overseas based, so we don't have a lot of power in terms of taking their powers with the safe image. So how do you kind of track what, what people are downloading in Australia? How does our laws then interact with something like the App Store, which is a multinational kind of company?
That's something that police are coming across all the time. So yes, it is an international issue, but what's happening today is that we will actually ensure that people who are downloading these apps will actually be found accountable for it. So it's Australians who are downloading things that are inappropriate for children. That's where the law will actually take place.
I just would add to that. This is not the only bit of reform that needs to happen in this area. This is a very specific thing aimed at perpetrators here. There is also broader work that needs to be done, which ICMEC identified in its recent roundtable, around putting more of a duty on digital platforms and implementing that promised duty of care. But this is a very specific piece of legislation that just addresses it at the perpetrator end, when someone is downloading these tools that are specifically designed for this purpose.
And can you just walk through the penalties that are in the bill, so what happens?
Yeah, so there are two new offences in the bill. One is for using a carriage service to download these specific tools. The other is downloading images for the purpose of training AI to generate this material. That's got a potential term, a prison sentence of up to 15 years that goes with it, which is similar to other similar offences. And there are a couple of defences available, but they only relate to law enforcement and legitimate research purposes.
Have you been in touch with like Apple or the App Store in terms of engaging with law enforcement?
Not in relation to this bill, because this bill is aimed at perpetrators who are doing the downloading. And these apps may not be available through the Apple Store, maybe through websites or the dark web. The challenge is capturing enough of the different types of technology that permits this, and finding where there is actually jurisdiction in Australia to address this. So there is more work to be done in making digital platforms accountable. This is just the start, but it's something that the government could do right now.
Chaney, have you had any discussions with the coalition about advancing
I have had a brief discussion with a coalition backbencher about it. Because I wanted to put this up urgently, I didn't have time to wait for the coalition to go through its party processes. I suspect that this would be above politics and there would be broad interest in addressing this child safety issue, but I'm not in a position to say what the coalition's official position is on it.
What about the government?
I've met with the Attorney General's office and discussed the bill, and while no promises were made, reading between the lines, it seemed that there is some acknowledgement that there is further work to be done in this area.
What interaction have you had with law enforcement agencies on this bill and the need for it? Have you had any advice from them, or have they expressed support?
I'm going to hand over to ICMEC on that.
Yeah.
So we had a roundtable last week that had the Australian Federal Police, members of state and territory law enforcement, the National Office of Child Safety, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. So most law enforcement agencies in Australia were represented. One thing that did come out of it is that we definitely need some action on this. So as Kate kindly said, this is one of many things that needs to get done, and one of the things that law enforcement definitely brought up in that space was more victim identification. This will actually help that, because it will stop the AI that is happening on the sidelines and allow law enforcement to actually get some work done on the real child abuse cases that are happening in Australia every day.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. You're up. Thanks.
The only thing I should say, this is a parent's nightmare, that your child's image, and our children unfortunately have so much content that is now online. It is an absolute nightmare to imagine that an image is then used, and with when a criminal is downloading this technology to then create this material. This can have lifelong impact on children and really damaging. We need these guardrails with urgency. We need the government to show that it can act quickly. My concern is, amidst the paralysis of a broad review of AI, we have these very clear areas of harm that go unaddressed for months at a time while more extensive inquiry happens. This is a very clear area of harm identified that can be dealt with very quickly.
And I would just also add, government is going to have to get a lot better at legislating in a nimble and responsive way. There are a lot of consultations and reports being undertaken in relation to AI, which is important. But if you look at how much AI has changed in the nearly 6 months since Parliament even sat last, the speed of change is extraordinary, and we are going to need to be able to address these emerging harms as they happen, so we can put guardrails in place so Australians actually feel safe in taking up AI and making the most of its benefits, knowing that we are actually dealing with the worst use cases of it.
Dave, I'd hope you to come all the way down here and not get a word. Just following on that last bit about AI intervening, you're trying to reintroduce, pushing for banning AI from elections. So I just want your take on that, about how we need to, I guess, nimbly respond to that, whether it's as urgent now, 3 years until the next election, and whether you've had any discussions with government about how this might fall into more electoral reform or truth in advertising reform, whether there's any overlap.
I think generally with AI, it's something where we do need guardrails, but it's not something that we're going to be able to constantly just try and legislate for. We do need some broad guardrails. That takes time, but I think clearly there are uses of AI where there is just no good argument for that not to be illegal. Misleading ads in elections is one. Producing child sexual abuse materials is another. This has huge costs to our democracy, to children, to families, to AFP officers who are having to trawl through child sexual abuse material. Why would we not just be saying these things we know should not be happening? So far we've seen a government that has been pretty timid when it comes to stepping into this space, where I think most Australians, the vast majority of Australians, would say that is a total no-brainer. That makes sense. Get on with it, Parliament. That's why we elect you.
So one more for Dan, I just wanted to ask on generative AI. So this bill covers a lot of the notify apps, which is easy to kind of categorise because that's the sole purpose of that. When it comes to generative AI, a lot of the AFP are having trouble because if it's a completely generated image of child sex abuse, then you can't really track down the victim, or it's hard to kind of make a criminal argument when there's no victim. So how do we tackle that as well? Is that something you're considering? Is that the next tranche? How do we look at that issue?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually came from 20 years at the AFP, so I've just come from the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, and even in the last 2 years, that sort of AI problem has actually grown substantially. So what the policing environment is looking at is how do you find tells in different AI aspects of things. So generally, we will always say that a child is always being injured or abused in the beginning of any process of AI. So there is always a real child that has gone through the system, and then it becomes further and further away from that real child. However, if you have a child, and if you are a parent, as Ali said, you are going to have that worry that your child is on the internet somewhere and that this is a continuation. So police, yes, it's something that needs to be happening all the time for police. They need the training, they need funding, they need the ability for these sorts of laws so that they can actually get the real work done.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
We've just introduced so on the truth in political advertising, Kate and I tabled just now in the House the government's very own electoral communication reform bill from the last Parliament, which they let lapse, and Kate seconded, and I believe Senator Pocock will be doing the same in the Senate to put it squarely on the government. You have 3 years. We are at the beginning of the term. It's a first opportunity that if they are genuine in wanting to stop AI and deepfakes and misleading, deceptive political advertising, the clock is ticking.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Let's have a quick photo.
Yeah.
Michaela, come and get a photo.
Grab your thing.
Thank you. Come on, Joseph. Love your sign. All good? Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.